Now, the jazz community mourns the passing of legendary drummer Louis Tebogo Moholo-Moholo, passing away last Friday. A towering figure in the world of jazz, Moholo-Moholo's revolutionary approach to liberation through music has left an indelible legacy that continues to inspire generations. And so his soul-stirring rhythms will continue to inspire and also just resonate within the hearts and artists and audiences alike. So joining us to pay tribute to this late great artist is his lifelong friend, Pallo Jordan, and fellow musicians, bass guitarist Jibo Pheto, as well as trumpeter Mandla Mlangeni. A very good morning to all three of you, and thank you for coming to pay homage to your friend. Mr. Jordan, I'm going to start with you. You're joining us virtually, of course. I just wonder, as a respected luminary and member of the steering committee, perhaps you could speak to Mr. Moholo's groundbreaking approach to jazz. I mean, having started in Langa in Cape Town, we saw the influence that he had, carrying those influences into his exile, what that did to shape not only South Africa's musical landscape, but also continue the plight of the apartheid resistance.
Well, I think the significance of a man like Louis Moholo was that he was in the fortunate position of arriving on the international jazz scene in the mid-1960s, when there was dramatic change taking place in that musical genre. Up until then, I suppose one could say the purpose of the drummer in the band was to keep time, but as the music evolved and influences, especially from the mother continent Africa, began to be felt more strongly in the United States, especially, the role of the drummer began to change from keeping time to providing rhythm. And there is a difference between the two. Sometimes one thinks that rhythm and time are the same thing, but rhythm, for example, is rain falling on your roof. That provides a rhythm.
Okay.
A metronome gives you time. And that's the difference. Moholo was fortunate in that he came from the African continent, and these things were not new or strange to him, and he integrated himself very easily into that modern jazz movement. Amongst the major contributors to that transformation, one can name drummers like Alvin Jones. One can name drummers like Sonny Murray, and also, of course, Tebogo Moholo. The role that he and the other South African musicians associated with him played, especially on the jazz scene in Britain and then in Europe in general, I think is widely recognized. And that's testified to by the number of awards he won in Britain and in Europe. In later years, of course, when he came home, he won awards here too. But I think his reputation is far more widely known and respected in Europe and internationally than it is here at home, which is regrettable, but perhaps that's the result of musical tastes here maybe differing a little bit from those in Europe. And perhaps also promoters in South Africa not taking a great interest in free jazz.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jordan, for paying such fun, sentiments to your friend. And I also want to bring in Mr. Jibo Pheto as well as Mandla Mlangeni to reflect on his life and times. We heard, Robert Wyatt saying that he was a living volcano, to Mr. Jordan's point about having, melodic depths, but also just that primal energy that he was able to infuse. Mr. Pheto, let me start with you. Talk to us about a fond memory that you would have had alongside this journey. What stood out for you in terms of Moholo's legacy, that really great spirit that was able to be uncontainable?
Well, for me, really, it's everything.
Yes.
It's everything in the sense that it touched me as a teacher of music and gave me discipline. Because the stage is no place to play, if you pardon the pun.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was a taskmaster. And then, of course, the thing that made me realize he really is a giant is that when we first played with him on stage, we hadn't had any rehearsals. So me and my brother asked him, now, how are you going to do it? He says, I don't take no prisoners. You swim or you sink. Now, the fact that we kept playing with him, we kept performing with Bra Louis, it means we swam. So it is a tough world out there. In Europe, it's very tough. So we needed to swim. And we had to swim. So I owe him a lot. His music sense, when you're on the stage with him, he conducts, he leads from the drums. It doesn't matter whether it's an 8-piece or it's a 24-piece orchestra. So it really was great, a real giant. Indeed, a real giant.
Mandla, what about you being a trumpeter but a collaborator as well? I mean, talk to us about your experience just on the back of what both Mr. Jordan and Mr. Pheto have echoed here.
Just to reaffirm, performing with Bra Louis was always like walking on a tightrope. And it was, I think that was an exhilarating experience. And more than that, Bra Louis was like a born performer. He always... he had the confidence of the audience, and whenever he performed, I think the audience was always part of the performance, and I think that's what endeared him to so many people. And I think also, I think Bra Louis also, had a reinvigoration in terms of the audience appeal, because I think in his late years, he also brought much younger musicians to actually perform with them. I think the last years he was at the Cape Town Jazz Festival, and he performed with a much younger audience, and I also performed with him as Stand-Up Bank Young Artist 2019, and we performed in Makhanda, and we had a bevy of young musicians alongside him, and that was the last time I performed with him. And I mean, always seeing him was always a breath of fresh air, and the stories that he'd always recount about his times in England, and him going to France, Germany, and performing with all these other Blue Notes who were also exiled at that time.
Yeah, I mean, he received the Order of Ikamanga for Silver in 2004, and then returned home in 2005. And we've seen how the new generation studying him, at least UCT is now at this program. Mr. Jordan, I want to bring you back into the conversation now, because we're looking at, his upcoming funeral, memorial service to try and honor his legacy and his contribution, not only to the jazz fraternity, but also just solidifying our history, our culture, and our heritage. How would you like to weigh in? Was enough done to honor him whilst he was alive? And how do we now take on that baton and continue with that legacy?
Well, I think one of the issues which we haven't paid enough attention to as a country is the impact South African music and South African musicians have had internationally. They are the easily recognized names like Buria Makebe and others, whom everyone knows and celebrates overseas. But there are many other South African musicians who have made an outstanding contribution, who tend not to be recognized. I think, for example, of pianist and arranger like Chris McGregor, who together with Louis left this country in '64 for the Antibes Jazz Festival. Chris McGregor could score as well as any Billy Strayhorn or any other of the great, arrangers, jazz arrangers. But these contributions hardly recognized. You think of another great musician, Makaya Nchoko, who left this country even early in '61, together with Abdullah Ibrahim, and settled in Switzerland. He's hardly even spoken about anymore in South Africa. The late Dudu Pugwana as well, an amazing alto saxophonist. And in Europe, I think his reputation is equal to that of an Eric Dolphy. And these, I think, are some of the things that we miss in terms of promoting and recognizing the contribution of South African musicians internationally. Now, Louis Moholo specifically as a drummer, if you look at his discography,
Yes.
what impresses you is his diversity and also just the courage he had playing with a whole number of other musicians. It's quite an impressive discography.
Wow,
And
Spirits Rejoice, Four Blokes, Viva la Black. There was a lot. But thank you, Mr. Jordan. Thank you to Mr. Pheto as well as Mr. Mlangeni for joining us and paying homage to the great jazz maestro, drummer Tebogo Moholo-Moholo, of course, who passed away last Friday. We continue to reflect on his life and times and the indelible mark that he's made, not only in our country, but obviously in the global stage as we look at his contribution at large.